everybody, this is Lee with Creative 2xmom Mom, and today's video is going to be all about what we read in the month of July. So welcome back to my channel. My name is Lee and this is Creative 2xmom Mom. This channel is all about homeschooling, parenthood, and thriving in the day-to-day. And boy do we need some encouragement for thriving in 2020. Today's video is going to be about what we read in the month of July. I'm going to share what I read for my personal reads as well as what we read with the kids. This video is also in collaboration with Ingrid over at the Ingrid Chronicles, so I'm going to link her channel down below as well as the playlist. So let's talk about what we read this month. My month started out with a book called The Call of the Wild and Free. Now you guys have heard me mention before that I like to use the summer as a way of doing some continuing education as a homeschool mom. I have a degree in English and I have my teaching credentials, so that's sort of the way my brain works, is that I'm always wanting to learn and grow and find new ways of reaching my kids and teaching them better. But The Call of the Wild and Free is totally out of my box. I love the idea of the educational philosophy behind it, but I've never quite been able to wrap my brain around how to make it work. It's so contrary to my type A thinking. So when this book became available for pretty inexpensive on Kindle, I went ahead and purchased it and added it to my summer reading list. I have to say, I still feel my brain spinning. And that's not a bad thing. I felt like the author did a really great job of communicating sort of the vision behind Wild and Free, and I buy into the vision of having our kids outside, of having them learn through play, of having them explore and grow through nature. She brought in some really good practical ideas, but the concept and the philosophy is so open-ended because it is meant to appeal to a wide variety of educational philosophies, which is great. But again, type A mama, I want to know exactly what I'm doing. So I feel like this is one of those books that I'm probably going to have to reread. I'm going to have to go back to it and take it in chunks. And even though it is very easy to read, I felt like I read this one pretty quick. The idea is pretty elemental, but the application is a little tough. So don't take my experience as a deterrent to this book. The book is really good. It's just that for those of us that struggle with sort of going with the flow, this will take a second read. The next book I picked up was also educational based and a little bit more toward the way my brain works. This is Dyslexia, Dysgraphia, OWL, LD, and Dyscalculia. This is by Berninger and Wolf. You can see I haven't actually finished it, and I'm probably not going to be finishing this one. I picked it up from the library. It is full of great resources. There's several chapters addressing each sort of learning disability and how to address that in a classroom setting. Now, why I'm not finishing this is because it is a great resource. I wouldn't say this is necessarily like a read and read through the whole thing, as much as it is focus in on where your child is struggling, or if they have been labeled with a disability. Focus in on that and then look through, okay, what can I do to help? And I should have realized that when I put this on hold, that it was going to be like that, but I didn't. So that's where I'm saying I'm not going to necessarily read through the whole thing, but I am reading sections of it and then taking notes to say, okay, if this arises or this has arisen in our homeschool, what are some of the sort of strategies that we can play around with, and see if they help. So I actually really recommend this one if you have a kid who is struggling with any sort of learning disability within that family. This one has some really great ideas, all the way down from early preschool interventions all the way up through 8th grade for sure. Possibly some of these things would apply to high school, but definitely through your middle school years. The next book I read in July was called Better Together. This is a reread. It's by Pam Barnhill. She is sort of the morning time person that you will learn about online, and she has some great ideas. This is, like I said, a reread for me. I go back and revisit this one every summer, and it's a very quick read. One of my favorite things about this is that in the ending chapters, she interviews several parents who have lots of different educational philosophies, lots of different methodologies, and talks about how homeschool morning time applies to each of those and how they make it work in their family. She interviews them, talks to them about their favorite resources, talks to them about how it enhances their homeschool. This I really enjoyed because it gave me a lot of different perspectives, not just the very free-flowing, like Wild and Free, not the very structured, like Dyscalculia, but a whole range of ideas. She also has a great section in the back with lots of different resources, things that her family has memorized, things that other people recommend you memorize, resources she's used in her homeschool, lots of resources from other families. So there is so much jam-packed in here, but you feel like you're being mentored through the process. It's not so clinical, cut and dry as much it is written in a very friendly tone, and that makes this one a quick read. I took this one camping, read it in about 3 days, despite the fact that we were swimming and fishing and all of that. It's very, very fast, but I feel like I get something different out of it for each year, and I think that's just because I have different kids each year. I have different seasons of growth. We're struggling with different things. We have different focuses each year. So this one I continue to revisit. The last book I have to share with you is called The Englisher. This is by Beverly Lewis. Last month I talked about the first book in this series because this is the Annie's People series. It's book 2. I talked about how the first book was a little bit predictable. I didn't know if I would continue with the series because it felt a little formulaic. I had about maybe 40 pages left to read when I did that video. And those 40 pages got really, really good. I was shocked about the turn of that book. And then I had to go pick up the second one. And I have to say, usually when you get to the second book in a series, there's sort of a lull because you're not just learning the characters, you're not usually getting this resolution, but it's a building of the story. The second book was so much better than the first book. The story continued a lot quicker. There was a lot more interest in the characters. We were talking about Annie, who sort of has this artistic ability, but because she's in the Amish community, she is discouraged from using this ability, and she has kept it a secret from her family for a very long time. She's struggling with her identity. Does she want to become Amish, or does she need to hang on to this artistic side of her? She meets this young man, Ben Martin, and he is an outsider. She actually meets him in book 1, but the story of their friendship really picks up in book 2. And you start to get hints that Ben may not be who he even thinks he is. There starts to be hints of maybe some kidnapping in the background, and he doesn't even really know who he is, and you start to piece together that maybe he's somebody else. This book, like I said, was so much better than the first one, and I'm going to be contacting my library to see if I can get the third one. I don't know if I can, but it's definitely got me hooked. This is probably one of the better Beverly Lewis books that I've read in a long time. Okay, so let's talk about the read-alouds that we did with our kids. The first one was The Vanderbreakers of 141st Street. This is by Karina Van Glasser. We started this book in the month of June, but I just sort of felt like we were busy and we didn't. I don't know what happened in June. And it didn't really grab us as much as I was hoping it to. You've got the Vanderbreakers. It's a family of 5 kids who live in a brownstone in New York, and they discover that they are going to be moving like the day after Christmas. And so they are fighting to convince their landlord to let them stay, to renew their lease. And it's all about the family dynamics between these 5 kids and how they work together, and they come up with this plan. Very, very good concept. I just felt like it was a little one note, maybe. Maybe my kids are too old for this book. I do think that my 8-year-old enjoyed it more than my 12-year-old, but there wasn't enough to keep the story going. It was a cute little story. They were sweet. I will say my recommendation for this is if you are looking for a story about siblings that work together, that love each other, they do definitely have their conflict, a little bit more conflict in this family than you would find in, say, the Boxcar Children, but still very sweet, kind of one note throughout the story. It was an okay read. I don't know that we will read any more throughout the series, but if you have younger kids, they might enjoy this one. The second book that we read is Letters from Rivkah. This is by Karen Hess. I think this is the same author that does Out of the Dust or Out of the Dust Bowl. This is the story of a young girl. She's 12 at the beginning of the story, 13 at the end, and this is during World War I. She and her family are Jews and Russians, so they are fleeing to America. Throughout this process, she ends up contracting a disease that requires her to stay in Europe longer while her family comes on to America, earns the money, and then sends for her later on. And it's all about her sort of growing up, coming to grips with the fact that she is a Jew in World War I and what America meant at that time. It meant freedom, it meant liberty, it meant opportunity, and what her family is striving for in that moment. This was a really good book. It was a little tough to read with my 8-year-old, sort of exposing him to the mentality and how Jews were viewed at that time, how they were persecuted for just who they were. My 12-year-old I think got it, but it was even a little bit hard to read with her because it's not just like handing her the book and knowing, I mean it would have been safe enough to do that, but it was hard to actually voice some of the things that were happening. And it's a good introductory look. I don't feel like it went too deep, but it did expose some of the things that were going on then and the just mentality, how they were treated, how they were viewed. Really good book if you're looking into that World War I time period, or if you just have, like for me, I have a daughter that's 12, turning 13 this year. I would definitely recommend this one. Okay, so what's next? I will be continuing to work through my summer reading list, which I will link that video down below. Several of these books were on there. Better Together was on there, Call of the Wild, Free was on there. You can check out that video to see what else I have. So I'll be continuing with that list. In fact, I've already started Mama Bear Apologetics. I'm really excited about this one. It was recommended by Shalise over at Sodbusterliving. I will link her channel down below. She always has great book recommendations, and so I am excited to read that one. The other book that I picked up that's sort of been my interim good fiction book is Chains by Laura Halse Anderson. I've had this one on my reading list for a long time and my library just got it. Yes, it is a 5th grade book. And no, I'm not necessarily reading it for my daughter. I'm reading it for myself. I think this is a series of 3. I saw the first 2 at the library for sure. It's a good look into sort of American Revolution, slavery, what it meant to be a loyalist, what it meant to be a revolutionist. We just got into George Washington. I was reading last night, just got into George Washington, and I've got to say, so far I'm about 100 pages in, and it's pretty good. So I will be sharing that one in August. Anything else, I'm not really sure. I'm not sure what August is going to look like because we're starting school back up. I have a high schooler. I don't know if he's going back to school. I don't know what's going to be happening with him. But you can be guaranteed that I will be reading something. Even if it's a lighter load in August, there's always a book going, sometimes 2 or 3. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I hope it gave you some good ideas of what to read with your kids. I would say this is a good one for middle school so far, what I've gotten into it. Hopefully some good ideas to enhance your homeschool. If you are reading something really good that you think I need to know about it, let me know. I have an ever-growing reading list. I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and we'll see you next time. Bye, guys.